quickly, I just want to make sort of like an explanation of what the design thinking process is, because I noticed that some of you are struggling with it. Also, Julia had a few questions about it. So I was looking for a way of like, how can I explain it the easiest way and how it's possible the best way. I was looking for some books. I didn't find books because they are not really a fast solution for this one. So I was rather looking for videos, and then I found this video, which has been viewed many times for you guys, and just trying to make you hopefully easily explain of like what the design thinking process is, because it's really important when you're creating your portfolio, when you're getting interviews, that you understand what the design thinking is about and how to execute to create digital solutions. So let's just jump in.
Design thinking is a 5-step process to come up with meaningful ideas that solve real problems for a particular group of people.
So basically now we're going to see the different five steps. Usually this is what we are referring to. It's just basically emphasizing, defining ideas, prototype, test, and implement. This is the process which we're going to follow through. So when we are saying design thinking process, this is what we usually mean, and this is what's going to be explained in this video.
The process is taught in top design and business schools around the world. It has brought many businesses lots of happy customers and helped entrepreneurs from all around the world to solve problems with innovative new solutions. Step 1. Empathize.
Okay, one thing which comes to my mind, and also with this diagram and also just with the video itself, normally if you're going to work on a project or if you're going to work at the workplace, even you're going to take the same steps, but the difference is going to be that you usually have like a design brief, sort of like a project brief, which is going to act as the catalysator or like the starting point for the project itself. So normally before even you start like emphasizing, you starting at the first step, you're normally going to have like at the beginning like a sort of like a project brief, which comes from your manager, comes from your, I don't know, whatever product owner, who says that, hey Julia, hey Balint, hey whoever you are, here is the problem, here is the feature which we need to develop, like find a solution for that, or find out how we can implement this, or create a new design for this. It's going to be something like this along these lines, and then you can start doing this process of like emphasizing, defining idea, prototype, test, and implement eventually.
The purpose of step 1 is to conduct interviews that give you an idea about what people really care about. We need to empathize with their situation. For example, if you want to help old people, you might find that they want to keep the ability to walk around.
And that's why I said this example, because now he's talking about like sort of emphasizing with the users, which is definitely correct and definitely do that. But without a problem in mind, I'm not sure like what they are looking for. Like when you're emphasizing, are you just like, you know, feeling yourself in the world, like, oh my god, poor old people, poor kids, poor whatever. Like that's why I'm saying you need like a project or sort of like an actual problem which you can work on, because otherwise you're not just going to spend your time and go out and emphasizing with people.
In your conversations, they might share with you different ways they can do that. Later into the interview, you'll want to dig a little deeper. Look for personal stories or situations where things became difficult. Ideally, you redo the process with many people with the same problem.
And by the way, what he's describing here really well is the phase of researching. These are the different methods how you can do the research phase, where you would actually like go out, finding your target audience, actually talking to them, listening to them, putting together a series of questions, usually like open-ended questions, so you're actually going to get more valuable information of like how the user is feeling, what could be the problems. Obviously, if you just ask like, what is the problem, how do you feel, they're not going to tell you it straight out. That's why you have to have really good open-ended questions. And that's why you also have to be a really good communicator as a designer, because you definitely going to meet with people during your research phases. You want to understand them as best as possible, and then you want to take notes of like how do they feel. And usually when we are talking about all of these things, it's going to be at the emphasize phase, right? But then we would like to define everything which we found here. So usually I could also say the divergent converge, the double diamond process. In the research discovery, in the research phase, this is what we mean. Like this is the reason why it's a diverge item, because then we are like looking for more information. And then the second section define. In this section, we're going to diverge, which is in our occasion it can be the defines phase as well, when we just wanna sort of analyze the data. We want to understand the data, which is going to come after emphasizing.
Step 2.
Yeah, now
define the problem.
I mean, define the problem, yeah, it's sort of arguable again. So this is what I meant. So normally in an actual company scenario, you're going to have your project brief at the beginning, which comes from your manager. And then at the middle, you're going to define the actual problem, which is going to quote a design brief, okay? So project brief, which sort of going to kickstart your project. Then you're going to do the research. Then you're going to do the analyzing. And then you're going to find the problem. Is the middle, actually. So, usually there is like a problem coming from your manager or product owner. This is going to be the project brief of like, hey, here is the problem, work on it. But you're going to be the designer who have to figure out of like, what is the actual problem. For example, if the conversion rate is like not good enough inside an application, if the users are not trusting the company or the service, if the users are confused of finding a critical information on your website, let's say on Netflix, for example. So anything could be the problem, but that's why you have to figure out the problem yourself. That's why a project brief is not good enough. That's why you have to do the research and then coming up with the problem yourself. And then this is going to be the part where you are defining the problem.
Looking at the interviews, you can now understand the actual needs that people are trying to fulfill with certain activities. One way to do that is to underline the verbs or activities that the people mentioned when talking about their problems, like going for a walk, meeting old friends for tea, or simply going grocery shopping around the corner store. You might realize it's not so much about going out, but more about staying in touch. After your analysis, formulate a problem statement. Some elderly are afraid to be lonely. They want to stay connected.
Right, I think that's a good example of like what I was just about to explain. So basically what this little guy was doing here, that he was first interviewing a lot of elderly people. He wanted to get some information. And then he realized that the problem is not the fact that they cannot go out, like elderly people cannot go out. That is not the reason why they are being frustrated, but rather they are being frustrated because they are just cannot keep in touch, they cannot stay connected, and this is their main problem. So I think that would be like a good idea when we come back here. So let's say my project manager comes up to me and he tells me that I should help elderly people create an application which is going to keep them in movement, like going to maybe give them challenges or like objectives which they can pursue during the day. But then it's going to turn out that the way to motivate them is not to actually like give them challenges and objectives to make them move, but rather maybe focusing on like how you can actually connect people, because this would be their underlying reason why they are pursuing of moving, and why they are just not going out and doing activities that regularly because they have no reason for doing so. And maybe just giving them challenges and objectives which they have to do, or to-do list, is not going to be enough. But if you discover the underlying reason that they are not connected enough, but if they would be connected, then they're going to be more activated and more motivated to actually do those physical activities. Then it's going to immediately shift or pivot the whole project, because the same way you're going to solve the original problem, right? But it's more of a actual solution because you are tapping more into the actual problem rather than the shallow on top of the problem. That's why we actually have to deep in, and that's why we have to find the right problem, because if you're not working on the right problem, your application might not going to reach its goal, right? Again, just to recap, maybe in this situation, the problem is not that they cannot go out, but just the reason that they don't have a reason to go out. That's why if they have like connections and more motivation to like connect and talk to each other, they're going to move out more.
Step 3. Ideate.
And with the ideating phase, this is going to be the part when you actually gonna start working on your solutions, basically. This is the part when you're going to do your brainstorming activities, the crazy eights, talking to people, checking like what competitors are doing. That's going to be that phase.
Now focus only on the problem statement and come up with ideas that solve the problem. The point is not to get a perfect idea, but rather to come up with
Again, it's important here that we have the problem statement, we want to come up with ideas, but it's important to find the right problem. This is what I just want to take home. And trust me guys, if you can articulate this, what I just said about like finding the right problem during an interview, I get so many really good feedback when I was doing this, because they told me like, oh my god, Brian, you really talk like a senior designer. And I was, yeah, of course, I know how this shit is working. No, I didn't say that, by the way. But like, I literally say to, like, during interviews, when I was doing like practicing interviews for creating these courses and materials, I was literally doing that, and they literally told me like, you seem like a much better candidate, Balin, because you can articulate like what design is about. And you know, that's why I'm saying and focusing on how to actually articulate these things here. Because if you can tell these differences, this is what makes like, this is what separates like a junior from a meteor, for example, that, or a senior, because we are understanding more of like what all of these things about, right? Sorry. Come back to the ideation phase, sorry.
Any ideas, like unique virtual reality experiences, senior-friendly hoverboards, or a modified pushcart? Whatever it is, sketch up your best ideas and show them to the people you are trying to help.
And by the way, I think that's also a good example of like when you are looking for ideas, it doesn't matter what the idea is, just like push out everything as much as you can, and then you're going to worry about later of like, okay, what is a realistic idea? For first, the more ideas and more directions you have, the better, because then you have more possibilities or options to choose from.
You can get their feedback. Step 4. You can get their feedback.
And yeah, here is like an important point of like, once you actually get the ideas, as I said, push out as much as possibly you can. But secondly, you also want to focus on getting feedback from stakeholders usually. This is going to be the point where you almost can do the first user testings. And when we are talking about like actually creating an application and a project, in this stage, the ideation phase is going to be when you are making your sketches, your scribbles, your draft outlines of your application. And then you're getting feedback.
Step 4. Prototype. Now take a moment to reflect on what you have learned from your conversations about the different ideas. Ask yourself, how does your idea fit in the context of people's actual lives? Your solution could be a combination of a new idea and what is already being used. Then connect the dots, sketch up your final solution, and go build a real prototype that's just good enough to be tested.
I think in our situation, when we talk about creating the application, that's going to be the part where you have the wireframe, and I would recommend of like, once you have the wireframes built up after the sketches, you actually make like a prototype which you can go out and test again. So in this stage, in the previous one here, still when they are just talking about the ideas, they are more like choosing the right idea, but it's already like giving you a good direction of like what to work on. But here, like once you actually start sketching and creating your prototype, actually in our case it's like in Figma you're going to create like a clickable prototype, then this is something which I definitely want to encourage you guys to like test it out even with your friends, family, because first of all you can put it in your case study that you are actually making like a user testing early on, which is going to look really nice in your case study. But secondly, you're actually going to get really useful feedback from the testing of like what to do, what not to do, what users cannot find, because you always like have a bias towards your design, right? You are the one who is designing it. You're always going to understand like what's going on. But at the end of the day, you're not making it for yourself. You're making it for a certain user persona, and they are the one who has to understand it. So the earlier you can test, the better. And in general, once you're going to work in a company, I highly recommend pushing early testings, because this is going to make or break your application. I swear.
Step 5. Test.
And then here we come to the testing phase.
Now test your prototype with actual users.
Right.
Don't defend your idea in case people don't like it. The point is to learn what works and what didn't.
And it's also important, like once you are designing, you don't want to be attached to your own design, and you don't want to take it personally when somebody is criticizing or giving negative feedback on your design, because these are the improvement points where you can make your design better. So if the more sort of like criticism and negative sort of improving feedbacks you can find on your application, the better it is, because then you can make your application and solution better, which eventually going to solve the user problems better.
So any feedback is great. Then go back to ideation or prototyping and apply your learning. Repeat the process until you have a prototype that works and solves the real problem.
And that's why in some other cases, as you can see here, even in this diagram, it's not like just a straight line, it's always going in loops. That's why we usually have these loop kind of images, because in every stage, sometimes you have to jump back. Sometimes maybe your solution wasn't good enough, then you have to go back. Maybe your prototype wasn't good enough, maybe it turns out that the feature is not good, maybe it turns out that the problem wasn't the right problem which you wanted to find or which you found. And that's why you have usually these like circular lines of like going over and over, and then maybe you're going to go to the next circle, maybe you're going to go to the next circle, that oh my god, you actually have to come back to the previous circle. Right? And this is what basically the design thinking process is about, of like going through the different steps, but willing to like go back and willing to redo everything, if not everything, but some parts of it, because this is going to ensure that your solution, your design, is going to be the best of fitting the market, because you can't constantly like reiterating. And to be honest, like all product development cycle is working like this. You know, companies are like, or applications pushing out a feature, then it's being tested, getting feedback from the market, then like new feedback is coming back, and then those going to be the reasons or tickets or features which the team is going to work on, right? This is the design thinking process, or we also can say it's like an iterative process, because you're always like going back and forth with like, okay, here is an input, here is what I want to work on, I want to test it, I want to put it out, more people can test it, oh my god, turns out like something has happened, then you're going to go back, basically. This is the design thinking.
Now you are ready to change the world or open shop. To experience design thinking firsthand, do the free virtual design thinking crash course from
Okay, yeah, it's not that relevant for us. So basically that would be the idea of the design thinking, of just like iterating over and over, testing everything, it's really important, and just going through the different steps and stages. Altogether, I can say it for you guys, the best way of like how you can actually practice it is like actually creating an application, okay? So without creating an actual application, I think these concepts are quite hard to get. Even for me, it took like, I don't know, a good few years when I was already inside designing, of like how to, sort of like what is design thinking is about, like how the hell it works, like what is the design thinking process and how it blends into like the agile methodologies, product development cycles, stuff like this. So it's like kind of like blending together. But if the best way to understand everything is you actually would go through a design process, and you would actually make a design, and you would actually do these steps which we outlined in this video. So hope it was helpful really much. If you have more questions, feel free to drop it in the comments. If you wanna be part of our private community, which is for free, you can find a link down below. You can join us there, and you can have this kind of chats with us and more resources of how you create your portfolio, how to get hired for companies, what interviewers are looking for when they are doing the interviews with you guys. So yeah, good luck. If you have questions, let me know.